I'm Roniel,
I'm DaRon.
and today is going to be interesting. We're going to do a continuation of threat modeling, or the threat modeling series that we've been doing so far.
You as an organization have to look at how are the different ways that I can my data, lose control over my data or the system or what have you. And that's what threat modeling is really about. And it's really just an iterative process where you go through all the different means. And that's exactly to the point, Ronald. By doing it in an iterative fashion, we can slowly build out cases that you wouldn't come up with otherwise. And by bringing as many people to it rather than having a single expert come in and drive the process, you will gather a lot more meaningful data, especially if you're involving different branches. If you're involving your penetration testers and you're involving your system administrators, because your system administrators know where the bodies are buried, your developers know where the bodies are buried, but at the same time you're also bringing in, say, your security analysts or what have you. If you involve all of them in this process, you will come out with a significantly more impactful, meaningful threat model that will save you money and reduce risk. If you do not, then you're missing the boat on the activity itself.
So, how many times do you see where they don't do that, where everybody's separate? We only bring the software developers in, and
Yeah.
you have them talk to the software developers, but you're not bringing in the security analysts, the SOCs, the network guys, everybody together. That's a part of this, the IT infrastructure to figure out where all the threats are. You only focus on this particular portion.
Yeah.
So you're also leaving out all of these other vectors that you haven't even thought about.
Yeah.
And, like a company that we worked for, it seemed like that's all they did. And all of the security teams and IT teams were separated. They didn't
Right.
talk to each other, they didn't have any communication, so they didn't know what we were doing or what the other was doing. So when something happened, we wasn't, unified. So
Yes.
that's the big problem as well when we're talking about threat modeling things. You have to at some point bring them all together. I know some people kind of go, separate, go to developers and this team and that team, but at some point you got to bring them all together and kind of figure out what all of these threats are.
That's true, and you're exactly right. It's unfortunately common to see this done in a vacuum with one team, and then another team might just review it, or they also do it in a vacuum, and it is not beneficial, and it gets just as bad, actually, when you try to break out of that, but instead you have big egos where the team thinks they know how to do it right, your software development team thinks they know how to do it right. Heaven help you if the software developers have security champions that think they are the one source of truth on the matter, and I've seen that. Then now you have the potential for a shutdown of all discussion. I had an instance at that company where I was teaching how to do threat modeling, and I was going through this process. And at the start of it, we had one individual who was so hell bent that he knew how to do it. So I left the room. I worked with the other group. After 20 minutes, I came back to the first group, and the other group had almost run all the way through. They were almost done. They enumerated just a whole bunch of different threats, a lot of different threat vectors, actors, and agents. They'd come up with a lot of risks, mitigations to it. They'd already been working on figuring out how to categorize and select the best mitigations for each one, all of this other stuff. But the first group, with the guy who was an expert, they were still arguing about the very basics of the system. And I came in and I said, wait, guys, you're going way too deep, way too deep. Let's just come up with a quick and easy definition what it is we're going to be looking at. And I started marching them through the process. And it took a lengthy period of failure before the one gentleman was willing to accept that he doesn't have all the answers, just like I don't have all the answers. I cannot tell you how your system looks. I can't. I cannot tell you all of the people who are after your system and your data. I can help guide you, but I can't do it alone. And no security team can. But at the same time, the administrators, the developers, the C-levels, the management, so on and so, no one has that. We all as a team have to come together in order to make this successful. And that's the most important.
And they all have to listen to each other. You
Yes.
can't single people out. I think sometimes people don't listen to security, but they want security to help them, but they
Yes.
don't want to listen. And then, you know, some security people don't want to, team doesn't want to listen to each other. So you all have to work with each other and listen to each other and take each other advice. Like you can't just, oh, well, you don't know what you're talking about. Like how many times do you see people get into a back and forth battle? We're all there to help each other. And the only way to accomplish that is by listening to one another and not speaking over each other and not thinking that one knows more than the other. Like
Yes.
that is a common issue as well. And it just becomes daunting if you don't, you know, listen to one another. So I just think that's another thing you got to keep into play or put into play as well.
I completely agree. I completely agree. And to that point, I want to remind everyone what you see here, this is just a high-level overview of the most common threat actors and agents. This isn't all of them, and it's up to you, your organization, to define those that are specific to your needs into the system. And it may include all of these, it may include some of these, it may include, I doubt it will include none of these, but it also may include a slew of additional ones, or maybe more explicitly defined entities within this particular thing. If you don't have spacecraft, you are less likely to be affected by a hypernova or supernova. For some of the space technology that I have helped to build, they very much cared about that. And they very much cared about magnetic storms. They very much cared about debris out in space coming down. Now, you may not be so worried because maybe your stuff isn't out in space and you think the likelihood that a comet is going to hit your one data center and take everything out is relatively low. And if that's the case, then that's great. Have that argument, have that discussion, make that decision. I can't decide that for you. Roniel can't decide that for you. But at least have the discussion and then say, okay, well, you know what? We don't care about this little bit, or this isn't so important to us right now. And that goes back to what we talked about before. And that's that examine the likelihood and examine the impact. And by the way, the likelihood today may be different than the likelihood of tomorrow, which is why this is an iterative process and why you should always review what you have decided before to see if it's still relevant, to see if the values still make sense.
Speaking of something, who would have ever thought that a comet could be a threat? And here's a vector. We're talking about, we're going past just digital. We're talking about outer space. So you have a lot of threats there and a lot of vectors there. That's some crazy shit right there to be able to have to think about the threats down here and then to think about the threats out there. Like, you know, man, that's exhausting right now. I was just thinking about that when you said that. I'm like, holy shit. And think about that. You got to do a threat model for that as well when you're putting like sending spacecrafts out in, you know, space. You got to think about comets, debris. You got to think about all these different things. Like what? That's
Yes.
that's okay. This goes back to something I want to say as well. We probably should talk about this in a later thing, but for people that say they are threat modelers, how the hell do you threat model that if you don't know how to threat model? And how the hell do you threat model that if you don't even know anything about that? Like, people need to step the game up on the threat modeling side because there's a lot of threat model people out there that say they can threat model and don't know shit about threat modeling. Please stop. If you see those people, call them out because it's not that we're trying to, you know, down anybody. It's that you want people to get better. So if somebody is saying that they do this or they're a threat modeler and people are looking at them as being the guy or the person to look forward to, and then they don't know what they're talking about or they don't know what they're doing, then people get misguided, misled. And we just need to start educating people further. Like if you're doing this and you're supposed to be a threat modeler, you should be able to threat model anything.
I think one of the things that worries me the most is when I see people who are allegedly dedicated to doing threat modeling, but and we've talked about this a few different times. If you don't work actively with digital forensics, if you don't work actively with law enforcement, I don't understand how you can determine adequately the threats, the threat actors, the threat agents that a system might run up against, because I don't know how you would determine the likelihood and the impact. I just don't.
Agree. I, I don't either. Like I said, we need to step up our game in this industry. And some people may hate that I'm going to say this, but I can say this with a straight face. See my face? 99% of the people in this industry are not good at what they do. And that's why we're continuously trying to hire better people. But if you are not good at what you do and you don't have good people or teachers or subject matter experts, how can you get better? You don't have people that actually want to learn and listen. How can we get better? You like what we say in martial art, you got to empty your cup. You don't know everything. Okay. So you got to empty that in order to get better. So I don't know how we're supposed to get better if people don't actually take the time to learn these things. I mean, you need a mentor, somebody to guide you that has been doing this for a long time. So again, I say 99%, and even your, but let me say, even the person that you idolize probably sucks.
Yeah.
You just don't know it, but he probably sucks. So I hate to say that this is not what this talk is about, but I'm just saying that when DaRon brung up the whole space thing, I would just be sitting there trying to figure out, like, okay, and I'm really good at science too, but I'm just like, what are all of these vectors that I got to figure out? I would be going crazy because I don't know what those vectors are. I mean, of course, you would learn that being in that field, but a lot of people would jump in and say, yeah, I can threat model this for you. And then get there and be like, oh shit, I didn't account for that. And then
Yes.
next thing you know, there's the spacecraft has been hit and it's done. Like we didn't account for that. We didn't account for all of these other things. Like that's a next level threat model there. And again, I'm sorry, I'm learning something because I didn't even think about threat modeling in space. I didn't even see that as a thing. So I'm sorry if this is amazing to me because I'm just like, how the hell would you do that? How the hell would some people who say they're threat model that you know that you called out, DaRon, actually would threat model that? And I mean, there's other things besides space, but that is one of the biggest unknown things, and you need to know what you're doing and have everything on point. It could say this is where people's lives are in jeopardy
Right.
every time people go out of space. That is, man, that's insane.
And
It's
it, it
insane.
it gets really interesting and really complicated quickly, because even if we just talked about something that's orbiting Earth, that's still, let's say we're talking about one of the few satellites left that provides GPS. Imagine if that gets knocked out by space debris, and that space debris can be blown up satellites because that's what we do, or junk from prior missions where the rockets are sitting up in there, et cetera, et cetera. I think a good example of this is the recent SpaceX launch. A lot of people, like, I was listening to some people talking, and they were, oh well, all those people were clapping and I don't understand why it blew up. And I'm just listening to it and I'm going, you don't understand what the mission was, and you don't understand what the different threats, et cetera were. So you don't understand, number one, why they blew it up, because it was a controlled explosion. And number two, based on that likelihood and impact, they decide what different thresholds are for mission success. And when you have that many rockets, to get it off the ground successfully is in and of itself a huge feat. But to get it so that it goes for 4 minutes before finally some of the engines just aren't behaving like they're supposed to anymore, so now it starts an uncontrolled tumble. Now you have to blow it up. Why do you have to blow it up? Because you don't want it falling on Hawaii and killing a bunch of people. So you blow it up in the ocean. Well, what did you have to do before you did anything? You had to sit there and do a flight plan, which includes a flight path. And then the government makes sure there's no one in that path. So when you do have to do a controlled explosion and get rid of it, you don't have debris raining down on someone's boat or ship and taking them out. All this other stuff. It's all very complicated. And one of the benefits, at least for me, it, anyway, in my opinion, is I've been lucky enough that I have worked with organizations that are great at safety and mission assurance. And the way we threat model today across our field was stolen from safety and mission assurance. It was stolen actually originally from the DoD, and it's phenomenal that NASA then actually improved it immensely, and then it fed back into the DoD's process, and it's since then proliferated amongst our industry. But I think if people maybe if our industry had more exposure to that side of it, this kind of thing, determining all of those different agents and actors and vectors, would be much easier.
No, I agree. Being able to make sure all of these things are right, because you have to, especially when people are going out of space. Like I said, like if I was an astronaut, I depend on you. I depend on you to make sure that my life, that I'm safe when I'm up there and I can get safely back. That's a lot of, like planning and understanding all of these
Right.
different vectors. So threat modeling is very important. And you never know how important it is until you start thinking about things that are actually life-saving things, like things
Right.
where people's lives are in jeopardy. And that could be, medical, that can be, space, that could be any of those things, cars, all that stuff is very important. So to me, I take this very serious because one wrong thing, one mishap, thing happen, somebody's life can be in jeopardy.
Right.
So I don't think people think or understand how like important threat modeling is, and how you can't take it. You got to be serious. You can't take it lightly. It's like it's very important, especially when you're in fields like that.
Well, thank you all. I hope this has been enjoyable. I hope maybe you learned something or a different perspective. And if not, I apologize.
Yeah, I think this, like, again, I try to put in my thing for people who don't know or think about this, take it very serious. I hope you guys enjoyed it, as DaRon said. And really, for those people who are interested in getting threat modeling, no matter what area field it is, take it serious. Take it, be passionate about it, because there's a lot of frauds out there that say they threat model and don't know what they're doing. And like I said, it could be somebody's life in jeopardy. It's just serious. So if you didn't think threat modeling was a serious thing, now this episode should spread light on that. So with that being said, I'm Roniel.
I'm DaRon.
And if you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. We got to get our follows up, man. We need our followers up. Come on, we're giving you good content here consistently. If you go to anybody else's channel, not hating on other people, but you're going to anybody else's channel, they're not giving you the content we are. So please subscribe to our channel. Go download the Super Vulnerable Job application. Learn some new things. Trust me, those are not out there online. So you can learn some new things. We're always updating it. We're always bringing in new vulnerabilities, new interesting things. So please check it out. Please go download it. Please subscribe to our channel. And until the next time.
Have fun.